on Google and, start looking for abortion clinics. I had this lady, that offered me everything. And I knew if I went to Washington, I was going to get more money out of it. She was like, "Are you okay?" I was like, I'm very scared. She was like, "You know what? Let me send you $300 more." It was Christmas. So, I get the $300 and she was like, "We will pay everything again. We will pay for your flight. We will pay for your hotel. We'll pay for daycare money. We'll pay for your kids' meals, your meals. And, any extra money that you need, we'll have it covered for you."
Well, howdy, everyone, and welcome to the Lauren Muzyka Show, your favorite update in the battle for life, family, and freedom. I'm Lauren Muzyka, attorney and human rights advocate, and I serve as president CEO of Sidewalk Advocates for Life. I'm so blessed, so excited that you're with me once again. We have something so special for you today and next week, namely a two-part interview with a Texas mom, Maria, who back in March scheduled a late-term abortion through a pro-abortion funding group after finding out unexpectedly that she was pregnant. She first tried to get an abortion in Kansas, but found out she was too far along. In other words, she exceeded the state gestational limit for an abortion and was rerouted by the abortion funding group to Washington, D.C. And just a few days before that appointment, courageously chose to cancel it and chose life, despite the funding group harassing her relentlessly to reschedule. Her son, Jesus, was born just a few weeks ago. Maria is here to tell you the entire story and how you can help moms like her choose life. Not only that, but in the next part of this two-part interview, you'll hear from Diane Powers, a Texas mom, grandmother, and pro-life advocate who became friends with Maria along the way. And she has a powerful message about the need to still be there for mothers in crisis, even in a state, especially in a state like Texas, that protects life at conception. Friends, this is not going to be just another interview with a mom who chose life. Maria is special. I predict this story is going to rock your world because you will see and hear about the inner workings of post-Roe v. Wade America as never before, and how these abortion funds relentlessly seek to capitalize on the crisis of mothers who are often low income and up a creek and don't know what to do. Maria's here today because she feels not only that God wants her to share her story, but she wants to highlight just how much the abortion industry preys on low-income women to pad their bottom line. So let me introduce you to our special guest today and someone who I am proud now to call a friend. Maria Salazar is a mother of three and has worked for over 20 years in the daycare industry in Dallas, Texas. A handful of months ago, Maria found herself unexpectedly pregnant, but didn't find out she was pregnant until about 24 weeks into her pregnancy. Surviving paycheck to paycheck as a single mom with two teenage children from a previous relationship, Maria was scared and overwhelmed and considered abortion. The Bridget Alliance, one of the top post-Roe pro-abortion funding groups, offered Maria a fully paid-for trip to Kansas for an abortion. However, when Maria got to Kansas, she was too far along and they couldn't do the procedure. And so the Bridget Alliance offered her another fully paid-for trip to a late-term facility in Washington, D.C., again covering flight, a DC hotel, over $600 in meal money, and more to abort her son at 26 weeks. Days before, she courageously chose to cancel her appointment and chose life. But the Bridget Alliance didn't give up. For the next 2 weeks, two different numbers called and texted Maria relentlessly, many times late into the evening, to get her to reschedule. Maria chose to block those numbers, stayed anchored in the hope offered through our community at Sidewalk Advocates for Life, and gave birth to a healthy baby boy, Jesus, just a few weeks ago. She is here today to courageously share her story. So let's go ahead and welcome Maria. All right, Maria, here you are. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you.
Good, good.
Nervous.
I know. I'm so proud of you. And you had shared with me that you felt called to share your story. I know that as we journeyed together the last few months, it wasn't even really something I brought up. It was just, I remember we were at the hospital and I got to hold Jesus for the first time. And you said, I feel like I'm supposed to do this, right?
You know, it's very hard. I felt like I was left alone. And I feel like if I can help other women, I'm telling my story and letting them know that they're not alone, that there's help out there.
Yeah.
That's why I decided. And, I asked you, I said, if you need me to help, if you want me to share my story, I mean, I will do whatever it takes,
Yeah.
to stop more moms from, making the decision of having an abortion.
Yeah, yeah, so beautiful. I'm going to kind of have you take a moment and then we're going to zip back for a little bit. What does it mean to you today to hold your son in your arms after everything that you've been through? And you've been through a lot the last few months, lots of ups and downs, right? People coming at you saying, oh, you have to do this. You have to have an abortion because otherwise you'll struggle, right? But then you also saw God show up in your story in a big way. So what has that meant to you?
Every time I see him, especially when he's asleep at night, I look at him and I ask God for forgiveness. That's something that, I still hold inside of me because I was so scared, but I didn't think how perfect he was going to be. And now I see him, and even though he cries at night, he's still perfect in my eyes.
Yeah, yeah.
But I still have that guilt, of I can't believe I was, give him up.
Yeah, yeah. You didn't know what to do.
I didn't know what to do. I was, like I said, I'm a single mom.
Yeah.
I worked 60 hours a week. I worked from 6:30 to 6:30.
Yeah.
Paycheck by paycheck, When I found out I was pregnant, that was the first thing that came into my mind. I wasn't worried about what other people were going to think or if I was going to be judged. The main thing in my mind was, how am I going to survive? I'm barely making it right now with two that are already grown.
Yeah.
I can't bring a little one into the world,
Yeah.
Diapers, formula. I mean, everything is just so expensive.
Yeah.
And I don't have time to, be dealing with a newborn because I'm at work all day.
Yeah.
So it was like, it wasn't, at that time I saw it as it wasn't fair for him or for me, and for my other two kids.
Yeah. It's like people are tempted to ask, well, who would consider abortion, especially one that is a little bit later into pregnancy, right? Help people understand that this is where you were. You were in a desperate place, right?
Like you said, how do you consider, or how does it cross your mind to consider abortion? It does. When you survive day by day, when you struggle to put food on the table for your kids, when you struggle to pay rent, I had a car that, I got picked up because I couldn't pay for it. That's how you make these decisions of having an abortion.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because, like I said, it's so hard right now. It's very hard. Childcare is expensive. Everything is so expensive.
Yeah.
And I knew that, I wasn't going to have anybody to help me. I was going to be missing work. I had a rough pregnancy and I was out most of the time. I had doctor's appointments and that's all my worries. And, a lot of people might say, but so you care more about the money? No, it's not about the money. It's about providing for your kids, at least a decent life.
Yeah.
And I wasn't going to be able to do that. When I found out I was pregnant, that was the first thing that crossed my head. Maternity leave. I have to be out of work. How am I going to pay my rent? How am I going to pay my groceries, my car note, everything? That was the only thing on my head.
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
Um,
Survival
so
mode.
you're in survival mode. When I
Yeah.
found out I was pregnant, I hated it so much. You know, I still remember I was hitting my stomach when I felt him moving inside of me. I hate the movement of him. I try to do so many things to get him out
Yeah.
on my own before, reaching these people, because I was scared of what I was going to do.
Yeah.
How was I going to survive?
Yeah.
I already put my two other kids through a lot. They basically grew up on their own because I'm always at work. So it was the same thing, going back and starting all over again.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've had the blessing, the gift of getting to know you the last few months and becoming friends with you. And I can tell you, you were just easily one of my favorite people in the world. You have such a beautiful heart. You had a heart to provide for your children. And you were just in the situation where you're like, wow, I am already 6 months pregnant and I am barely making it now. And so the idea of adding another child to the family was just so overwhelming, right?
Yeah, I remember, I went to Walgreens and I got 3 pregnancy tests. When I saw them, they came out positive. I screamed, I cried. Next morning, I wake up and I get on Google and start looking for abortion clinics. I didn't know they were illegal here in Texas. So I find one that says Planned Parenthood, and I call. And they were like, well, we can't do it here in Texas, but there's so many options for you, even adoption. I was like, no, I'm not the I don't want to bring a child. Adoption was not on my.
It was
my
hard
yeah,
for you to
yeah.
imagine continuing the pregnancy and
I
then
just wanted to
placing the
end it right
baby.
now.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
remember I told the lady, if you can help me, and they were like, yeah, but it's expensive. When she told me $9,000, I was like, I don't have that kind of money.
Yeah.
I think that day I had like $50 in my bank account. I was like, where am I gonna get $9,000 from? So I called different places, and they were like, well, let me call you back and see if we can find somebody that can help you, because there's a lot of places that are willing to help, pay for abortions. I remember I cried in the car and I said, thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus.
Yeah.
Because they were willing to help me.
They were there for you like that.
Yes,
You made
yes,
this phone call.
yes.
Planned Parenthood said, we got you taken
I
care
called
of.
them at 9 in the morning. By, I want to say, 3 o'clock, they had everything for me
Lined up.
already. I remember they said, don't worry, we have different groups that are willing to help, that, help moms in crisis. That's what they call it, moms in crisis. And they were like, we'll pay for your gas money. If you need to fly somewhere, we'll pay for the hotel, meals, everything. Child care for your other kids. I was like, oh my God. I was blessed at that time.
Yeah.
She was like, let me go ahead and schedule you for a clinic in Kansas, which is closer to where you live. And I was like, but I've never been outside of Texas, I was so scared. I was like, I've never been on an airplane, never in my life been on an airplane. What am I going to do? Yeah. And she was like, don't worry, we'll walk you through the whole process. I will, when you get ready to get on the plane, there's going to be somebody in there on the phone with you telling you what to do. I mean, they just made it seem so beautiful. I remember that lady that I was talking to, and I still have her messages on my phone. She was the sweetest person ever at that time for me.
Right, right. So you called Planned Parenthood, and within hours, they had this entire trip laid out for you and a guide, like literally a woman who was going to take you by the hand, the sweetest voice, time, right?
She was an angel for me at that time,
Yeah.
And I remember she sent me $200. She was like, are you struggling with anything right now? And I said, well, I don't have no money. I only have $50 in my bank account. I remember, she said, can I sell you some money for whatever you need? When I tell you, I got that money so fast, and I went to pay my water bill because I felt so blessed.
Yeah.
And at that time, I was like, I think God wants me to have an abortion because look what he's.
Look at how this all got lined up so fast, right? Yeah.
I get off of work, and by 6 o'clock, they call me again. And they were like, Maria, we have great news for you. She was like, everything's paid for. Everything. You don't have to worry about nothing. And tomorrow in the morning, you're going to get another $400 deposited into your bank account. I was the blessed person,
Yeah.
I even told my kids, I was like, what do you want to eat today?
Right. We're going to have a good meal tonight, right? Wow.
And I remember my son, my son just looked at me and he was like, what is this for, Mommy? I said, don't worry about it. I said, don't worry about it, because nobody knew that I was pregnant.
So your kids didn't even know at this point, right?
No.
Your mom.
I was very not ashamed of it, but scared, because of course, people always want to know.
Questions.
One, because I'm 40 already, people judge you're 40 and you don't know how to take care of yourself. You're still getting pregnant. Explain that. That was one of them. The second one was, I'm not married. I'm a single mom.
Yeah.
People always like, well, you're already struggling. Why get pregnant again? Sometimes you don't choose things. Things just happen.
Yeah.
God knows why he puts them in your life.
Right. And you had shared with me that you had been in a relationship with a man for about 4 or 5 months, right? And you found yourself unexpectedly pregnant. And you had even thought you may not be able to get pregnant at 40, right?
I thought I was going through menopause.
Yeah.
I'm 40 already. I'm a diabetic. I have high blood pressure. I was like, oh my God, the greatest thing in the world. I'm going through menopause,
Yeah.
I was like, I don't have to worry about anything no more.
Surprise.
Well, menopause.
Yeah.
Menopause turned into almost 5-6 months of pregnancy. I didn't know. A lot of people ask, well, how did you not know?
Yeah.
Because since my diabetes was always really bad, the doctor got me an Ozempic. So Ozempic was a life-changing for me. I lost so much weight. I was just getting my health back.
Yeah.
Thanks to this medication. So instead of gaining weight, I was losing the weight. So that's why I didn't know I was pregnant.
Oh, that makes sense, because a lot of people have watched like the TV show I Didn't Know I Was Pregnant, right? That was famous on, I think it was TLC. And women ask all the time, how could you not know? How could you not know? And that makes a lot of sense, right?
Especially right now with Ozempic. I remember the doctor at Parkland said, well, welcome to the Ozempic pregnancy.
Oh, wow. Yeah, this is a thing.
But, going back to the abortion, all that happened Monday. Tuesday, I go back into work and, I get another phone call from them saying, do you know how far along you are? I was like, I'm guessing, I kind of gave them a guess estimate, yeah. And they were like, well, we need to get you in here fast because, Kansas City only has a certain limit of, months that you can be pregnant to do the abortion. I was like, give me there ASAP.
Yeah.
I remember I lied to my manager to be out of work because I was so embarrassed to tell them that, I was going in for an abortion.
Yeah.
I remember I made up this huge lie just to be off of work.
Yeah.
But I wasn't going to tell anybody that I was pregnant. So, I told them that to give me a couple of hours so I can talk to my manager and, see if I can be out. I talked to the manager. I gave her a whole story of, why I needed to be out for 3 days. And they were like, okay, yeah, you can be out. I get off at work that day. I called them because the lady, she told me to see her as my counselor, as my friend. Whenever I felt bad or was having a bad day, I could always reach out to her. So she became very close to me. I would call her at the middle of the night and telling her, please don't forget about me. Please don't forget, that you have me on the list for the abortion. And she was like, no, we have everything ready.
Do you know if she was with Planned Parenthood or was she with the Bridget Alliance?
She was with the Bridget Alliance.
Okay,
Yes.
so they had someone designated
Yes.
with this abortion fund to be
Yes.
your guide through the entire
They have a
journey.
person, that's going to stay with you throughout the whole process.
Interesting.
You
Yeah.
have their number. You can text them at any time of the day. You can call them even on the weekends. She was like, I'm here for you. And like I said, at that time, she made me feel so loved.
Yeah.
And that I wasn't alone and I wasn't going to be judged. That's what she made me feel.
Yeah.
So then Thursday morning, she calls me and she's like, we have everything ready. She's like, are you driving up here or are you flying? I was like, no, I've never been on an airplane. I'm not getting on one right now. So she was like, okay. She's like, we'll send you $300 for gas money. She's like, if you don't use it all in the gas, you can use it for whatever else you want.
Wow.
I remember Friday morning, I get up at 2 a.m. and I told my kids, I said, don't ask where I'm going. Mommy will be back, hopefully Sunday afternoon. Wow. I pack a bag and I hit the road by myself. Drove almost 10 hours. I was crying the whole time. The whole time.
Why were you crying?
Lauren, because deep down, I didn't want to do it. But I didn't have any other choice. I kept thinking about what am I going to do? Yeah. I cannot afford to keep a baby. I couldn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the whole 10 hours, I was crying. And, she kept calling me every hour to check up on me, see how I was doing.
Really? She's calling you every hour.
She was so nice. Like I said, she was so nice at that time, because she was the only one that knew that everything that I was going through, and she wasn't judging me at all. Yeah. Once I get to Kansas, she was like, I was one of the first ones for the appointment. She was like, your appointment, it's at 1:30. She said, there's going to be a group of people out there that are going to try to stop you. You just don't listen to them. She's like, you do not put your window down because they would try to do anything in their power to stop you.
So she told you there was going to be a group of people reaching out or protesting or something like that, right?
Yes. I remember I get there and they were there. She told me, don't put the window down. I put my window down. And, this lady, this sweet lady, she was like, don't do it. There's always more options. Let me pray for you. I was so mad because I wanted to get it done so fast that I remember I cussed that lady out.
I remember you told me at the hospital, she was wearing a blue vest, baby blue vest. And do you know, we figured out she was a sidewalk advocate. She was with Sidewalk Advocates for Life with our ministry. You didn't even know the story that God was lining up for you, I guess. But
I guess, if now I see it and everything it was meant for. God has his plans and his ways. So I remember, I cuss her out. I put my window up and I walk in the clinic still so nervous, crying.
And I remember you saying that she said to you, we're not here to judge, right?
We're not here to judge you, yes.
Yeah,
she said, you don't have to tell me anything. Yeah. She's like, just let me pray for you. I said, no. I said, I'm here to do something, Yeah. Couldn't miss my appointment. Yeah. Once I, park, they called me again and they were like, Maria, we're going to send you $700 more. I was like, oh my God.
Once you got there, yes. Another $700.
Another $700 because, they wanted to make sure that I was going to actually be at the clinic. Wow. I don't know why, but they want to make sure that you're at the clinic already before they send you all the money.
Is that meal money? Do you remember why they sent you that?
She said it's meal money and for it, like needs that you have after the abortion, like pads. She said medication because, some women do get really sick. Even, if you want to go to Walmart and buy some comfortable clothes. I was like, oh, no, I packed everything. I'm keeping that money, to pay for my rent, to pay for my bills. To me, that was a blessing. Right. That was a blessing.
Right.
So
that's a lot of money too. Yes, $700.
When I remember when I first met you, I told you, Lauren, I don't have a bank account. I don't have a savings account. Yeah. Because I couldn't. There was at that time there was no way for me to save money because we live paycheck by paycheck. So what am I gonna have in the bank? So I get there and she's like, just get off. Tell them what you're there for. They're gonna have all your information, and they did. I get off. when I first walked in and opened the doors, to see more females like me, some of them as young as 16 years old with their mothers in there. And you can tell that they're in
desperate need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because most of us are low income people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the money that is offered to you at that time, for us, it's a lot of money,
Yeah. You even said at one point that if somebody plays their cards right, they can make money off of the abortion, right?
I feel like, now that I think about it, hearing a woman, say, because I remember I was sitting next to one and she said this was her fourth abortion. I was like, God.
Wow.
You
fourth abortion, fully paid for.
Fully paid for. Yeah, you don't pay for nothing.
Gosh. Yeah. And she probably, who wouldn't keep some of that money, right? So much dumped into your account.
Yeah. That, like I said, you have money to pay for your rent. You have money to pay for your car note. You have money to buy groceries. Even, it might sound bad, but even the chance to stay in a nice hotel.
Sure.
Because I remember, the hotel that I got booked for, I was like, oh my goodness.
Never been in a place like this, right? No. Yeah.
I remember I walked in there and I took pictures of it and I was like, oh, look at the bed. The bed was so beautiful. Everything was just so beautiful. And I remember the lady told me, you don't even have to, buy food from, just call the restaurant and they'll take it up to you. If you don't have to move, we'll get everything fixed for you. If you feel like, you're going through stress or trauma, we'll have a counselor that can talk to you.
Wow. So they had everything lined up for you.
It was beautiful.
Gas money, hotel, meal money, a counselor, right?
Everything.
Yeah.
Everything. Once I get, I fill out the paperwork and I take it to the lady at the front desk and she was like, you don't have to pay for nothing because everything's paid for. I said, yes. I was so anxious to get called back there. I remember they called my name and I got, I was laying down on the table and they were getting ready to do it. But I don't know why the nurses, one of the nurses was like, you know what, we need to do an ultrasound. I was like, okay.
To see how far along you were. And probably up into this point, they told you it was going to be, what, a 2-day procedure? Or
actually, because of the weeks that I was, she said 1 day.
Okay.
1 day, if everything goes right. But, they were like, we need you to stay here in Kansas City just in case something doesn't go right, you're closer to the clinic. So they do the ultrasound. And I remember the nurse, she stayed out of the room for like 30 minutes. I was so anxious to get it done already. I was like, what is taking them forever? Come on. They go out. 2 doctors come in the room. One of them was actually pregnant. I remember her so well. She was, I want to say she was like 8 months pregnant already. And she was like, I'm sorry, sweetie, but we can't do the abortion because you're too far out. I cried. I cussed them out. I kicked everything in that room. I remember I even threw their cups on the floor. And I was like, no, you don't understand. You need to do it.
Yeah.
I don't have a choice. You need to do it. She was like, I'm sorry, but we can't. It's against the law. Wow. And I was like, no, you don't understand. I can't go back to Texas and still be pregnant. She was, one of the doctors was like, you know what? I'm from Chicago. She's like, but I come here, every other month just to help out. She said, Chicago offers full-term abortions. She said, I can do it in my clinic.
Wow.
I was like, let me see how far Chicago is.
Right. And did they tell you at that time how far along you were?
She did. She was like, you're over 24 weeks.
You're over 20. You're past 24 weeks, and they couldn't do it because
they couldn't do
the state limit was lower. Yeah. So she offers you.
She offers me one in Chicago.
Wow.
But I was like, no, let me call my counselor first. So I get dressed, I storm out of that clinic and I sit in my car and I call her crying. And she was like, "No, Maria, don't worry. There's still hope for you." And I was
Hmm.
like, "Please help me." And I remember I begged her. I said, "Don't leave me alone. Please don't leave me alone."
Yeah.
She was like, "Let me call some places, go to the hotel, get some rest, get you a good meal, enjoy your stay there."
Wow.
I stayed there that whole day. The next morning, I get up to come back to Texas and I get a phone call from her. And she was like, "Maria, guess what?" I said, "What?" She said, "I have great news for you." I was like, "Yes." She's like, "Do you have $250 right now?" I said, "Well, I have the money that you guys sent me. She was like, "Okay, I need you to deposit. I'm going to give you a number and I need you to deposit this amount of money to this place where they're going to do the abortion in Washington, D.C."
So a deposit.
Yes, it was a $250 deposit.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, I didn't think of it twice.
Yeah.
I remember, I did the deposit. She gives me a number to call that clinic in Washington, D.C. And they were like, "Well, the abortion here is over $20,000. I was like, "No, there's no way." No.
So an abortion that late
Yeah,
term.
it's $20,000.
They told you $20,000.
She's like,
Wow.
because it's a whole different procedure. It's a full baby already.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
So I remember, before leaving the hotel, I stopped at a gas station and she was like, "Are you okay?" I was like, I'm very scared." She was like, "You know what? Let me send you $300 more." I was like, "God, keep the blessings coming."
You just felt like
Yes.
this woman was sent to you to.
It was Christmas for me. It was Christmas. So I get the $300 and she was like, "I'm gonna call some people. There's a lot of help out there." She's like, "Don't feel like you have to pay the $20,000. She's like, "We'll help you out." She's like, "There's a lot of organizations out there that are willing to help you." She's like, and we will pay everything again. We will pay for your flight. We will pay for your hotel. We'll pay for daycare money. We'll pay for your kids' meals, your meals, and any extra money that you need, we'll have it covered for you. I was like,
Wow.
okay,
Who wouldn't take
yeah,
that deal, right? Oh.
I go back. I come back to Texas. I already had it planned out. Um, I go and visit my mom, and my mom was like, "Do you have something to tell me?" And I was like, "No, I'm good." She's like, "No, you're not." And I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm good." She was like, "Okay, just remember, there's a God up there, and God, you can lie to everybody. You can even lie to yourself, but you cannot lie to God."
Wow.
I remember I got into a big argument with her, and I said, "You know what? Just stay out of my life."
Yeah.
I said, "You can't help. You can barely support your own self. So whatever I have going on with me, I'll figure it out on my own." I said, "You worry about you, my dad, and I have a brother, that's really sick because of drugs." I was like, "You worry about that. I can take care of my own self."
You pushed her out.
The next day, I go to work and I get a text message from this lady. She was like, "Maria, we have great news. We found an organization that's willing to pay for everything, everything."
And was this still the Bridget Alliance?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was the Bridget Alliance, and it's another one. I have the name on my phone. I forgot the name, but it was two of them that were willing to pay for everything.
Yeah. They were working together.
Yes, they were working together. They came up with half of the money each.
Okay.
And she was like, "This time you can't drive. We have to get you in an airplane." I was like, "But I've never been in an airplane before. I'm scared." And she was like, "Don't be scared. I will guide you through everything. I will be with you on the phone through everything." She was like, "Just send me a picture of your passport." She's like, "Do you have a passport?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm a USA citizen." She was like, "Okay, that's all I need." She's like, "I'm gonna book the flight. I'm gonna have everything ready for you. I will pay for the Uber to get you to the airport. I was like, oh my God, God, thank you. Thank you for hearing me. That whole day, I was so happy because I was like, oh, thank God this is gonna come to an end. I couldn't stand him moving inside of me no more. Whatever I remember I used to call it whatever it is. Whatever it is that's moving inside of me, I hated it so much.
You were trying to push it away because you were so in crisis.
Yes,
Couldn't see a way forward,
yes,
right?
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Like I said, and it sounds so bad, but the word is I hated it.
Yeah.
I hate everything about it.
Yeah.
I work at a daycare. I love working with kids. Love working with kids. I've been working at the daycare for over 20 years. It was in the head of, my head, like, you work at a daycare with kids. You love kids. You're here with other people's kids trying to make them comfortable, make them, love because they're here all day.
Yeah.
But you're about to have an abortion.
So it's like the words from your mom and then this thought about the daycare. It's almost like something was starting to work in your mind and your heart.
But, like, again, it goes out to the finance. I didn't have the money to have a baby. I wanted him or her. At that time, I didn't know what it was. I wanted to keep it. But I knew I wasn't going to make it, and it wasn't fair for the baby. It wasn't fair for me, and it wasn't fair for my other kids. What did I have to provide for them?
It just seems to me that the enemy, a lot of times, and I can just see in your story, sometimes he comes in a form where it's like, this is everything that you hoped for, everything that you prayed for, right? This woman comes in and she's going to be your guide through this whole thing. Says, hey, no problem, fully paid for abortion to Kansas, fully paid for abortion to Washington, D.C. We're going to give you money. If you're in crisis, we'll give you more money, right? I'm your best friend. I'm going to walk you through this whole thing, right? So on the surface, it looks so good, right? And who wouldn't take it if they're so desperate and they're being told, well, it's kind of a baby, but kind of not, right? Because you can kind of get into that headspace.
I remember she told me, because I told her, how does the process work? Because I didn't know how abortions work,
Yeah.
All this time I thought it was, you just take a pill and
that's
you
it.
just bleed.
Simple.
And you just bleed and that's it. You don't even know what it is.
Right.
But I guess because I was so far out, when she explained to me, I was like, oh my God.
And she probably gave you a real broad view too, right?
She was like, but don't worry, it's still, it's not a baby yet.
Huh. It's not a baby yet.
I still have it. I had it in the back. So I go on the phone and I'm like, how does a baby look at 25 weeks pregnant? Well, I see the picture. That's a full baby.
Yeah.
That's a baby.
Baby's just gaining weight at that point.
That's a baby.
Yeah.
I go on TikTok and I, see how they do late term abortions. And I'm like, wow.
It's a bigger deal than you thought.
Oh my God, yes.
Because I think what the world is told is, like you said, it's a pill or a simple surgery, and it's almost like out of sight, out of mind. You go through it.
She was like, you're just gonna bleed for a couple of hours. You might have some pain, but you take Tylenol, take Advil, and it will go away.
And they didn't tell you probably that you'd have 1 to 2 days of laminaria, maybe having to deliver stillborn, or they would do a D&E procedure, right? Where they're literally pulling the baby out in parts, right?
That was the plan for Washington, D.C.
Okay.
Washington, D.C., they were going to, actually pull something out. I didn't know why, because I didn't want to get into details because I didn't want to find out, I was like, I'll just go.
You're so desperate. Let's get this over with.
The procedure. Don't tell me anything.
Yeah.
Don't tell me anything about it.
Yeah.
At work, she calls me again and she's like, well, Maria, we're gonna deposit $200, just for whatever you need again. I was like, okay. She's like, and your flight for Washington, it will be booked for Sunday night. So, that whole week, Monday through Sunday, I was having money coming into my bank account.
Wow.
Uber gift cards, Uber Eats, Uber gift cards for my kids. So, that whole week we were buying food, because.
And did you feel like maybe they were really leaning into, oh, we want you to go through with this, right?
She said, she's like, you're not the only one. And, there's a lot of women that do it. And a month into it, you'll forget about it and you just have your normal life. And if you ever need counseling, they offer counseling too for women that have abortions and,
Want to talk
yeah,
afterwards.
want to
But she
see.
made it sound very simple,
Very,
mundane.
very easy, like it wasn't a big deal.
Right.
Like it was normal to have an abortion.
This late,
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And what you're seeing on the internet is actually telling you something a little bit different,
Yes.
that this is much bigger, much more involved, much more impactful. Yeah.
So then that, I think it was Wednesday or Thursday, my mom, I see my mom again and she's like, again, the question, do you have something to tell me? I was like, no. She was like, can I ask you something? I said, yes. She's like, you have 2 kids already. Will you kill those 2 kids?
Ooh,
I was like, excuse me?
where did this come from?
She's like, will you kill one of your 2 kids right now? I said, no. I said, what's wrong with you? She said, well, what gives you the right to kill the one you have in your stomach?
So she knew.
She knew.
And I think you told me that she had a dream.
She had a dream. She said she had a dream where I was wearing a white dress holding a baby.
Isn't that amazing? I'll get chills when you tell me that story.
My mom is very a woman of God. My mom, oh my God, I always say when the world comes to an end, she's one of the ones that I must see going up there.
Right.
Oh my God.
Very prayerful woman.
Oh my God. She gets up she was involved in a car accident, really bad car accident. She has metal in most of her body. She still, with all that pain, she gets up every morning at 3 a.m. on her knees to pray.
Wow.
Every morning. There's not
Wow.
one day that she doesn't do it.
Wow.
And I remember, when she told me, she's like, so what gives you the right to kill that one? I said, don't worry about it. Like I told you, stop getting in my life. I got it. You don't worry about me.
You're pushing her away again, right?
And she said, you know what? Me and your dad are barely making it because my dad's retired because of his diabetes. She was like, but if I have to go out on the streets and beg for food, I will keep the baby.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow.
Those words stayed on my head. Oh my God, that whole night, Next morning, I get up and I go to work. I was so desperate to talk to somebody. In one side, I had this lady, that offered me everything. And I knew if I went to Washington, I was going to get more money out of it. Because from Kansas, I already got over almost $2,000. So I was like, if I go to Washington, they're going to go
Give
up
you a
on
lot
the
more.
money. Yes.
Yeah.
So I was like, what else do I want? This can help me out a lot right now. Right now. It's not a baby inside, because that's how they made it seem. So I was like, I kept telling myself, it's not a baby. Just do it. It's not a baby.
It's almost like you were hearing her words too, right? Everything that had been said to you. It's not a big deal. You want to believe that, right?
Yeah. And you're going to have all this money to pay for whatever you need. So I go into work, and I have the sweetest parents at the daycare. One of them, she looked at me, and I had just finished crying. I don't cry in front of the kids. I don't cry in front of the parents. I went in the restroom. I come out, and she was there. She's like, Miss Maria, are you okay? And I was like, yes. She's like, are you sure you're okay, Miss Maria? Because I'm always, whatever I have going on, I don't take it to work because, the kids are there, for you to give them love, give them comfort. Of course, they don't want to see you crying. And she's like, Miss Maria, are you okay? I said, yes. And she's like, do you need to talk? And I was like, do you have a minute? And I was like, can I tell you something? But please promise you're not going to say nothing, because of course I work at a daycare. We're in Texas, it doesn't sound right to a lot of people.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm pregnant. She was like, excuse me? I said, I'm pregnant. And she, the first words that come out of her mouth are, congratulations. I said, no, no. I said, it's not that kind of pregnancy. She's like, what do you mean it's not that kind of pregnancy? I said, it's not a pregnancy that I want. I remember she looked at me and she said, I'm not going to judge you. So, when I told her, I said, but I want to have an abortion. And she was like, excuse me? She's like, I'm not going to judge you. She's like, it's just, I guess he caught her by surprise. She said, can I ask you why? I said, well, I'm here at work all day. I'm a single mom. And I remember her question was like, the dad's not in the picture. And I was like, no. She was like, it's okay. You don't have to tell me anything. She's like, I love you, Miss Maria. I said, thank you so much. And she gave me a hug. She gave me a big hug and she left. Well, I guess that stayed on her head. Because later throughout the day, the kids go down for a nap at 12:40, and I had already the kids down for a nap, and I was, sitting down cutting the work for the next day, and I get a phone call, and it's like she said, Miss Maria, I'm sorry to bother you. Do you have a minute? I said, yeah, the kids are down for nap. She's like, can I give your number to somebody? And I said, oh my God. I said, did you tell somebody about what I told you? She's like, I just felt like it was the right thing for me to do. She's like, but if you don't want to talk to her, that's okay. I said, okay. She said, but before I hang up the phone, can I ask you why again? I said, because I can't. I said, you see me here all day. Like I said, and it's not that I'm trying to make up excuses, but I just can't have another child. She was like, but there's a lot of adoption centers. And I was like, no, adoption is not in my plans. I said, plus, I said, don't worry about it. I said, I have it all figured out already. I said, I got a place, they're going to do it. They're going to pay for everything. I don't have to pay for nothing. I said, just, if you can do me a favor, don't say nothing at work because, I don't want nobody to know. She was like, okay. She was like, but can I give your number to somebody just in case? I said, yeah. So, that afternoon, I get a phone call from you.
So what people don't know is that this mom at the daycare talked to my sister-in-law, who knows what I do, which is helping moms facing unexpected pregnancies or in crisis, right? And then I got your phone number, and she said, will you talk to Maria, right? So nap time. So what do you remember about that?
I don't know if you remember that I was crying, that I told you, oh my God. I remember I told you, I was just asking God for just to send me something not to do the abortion because I really want to do it. I didn't want to do it. I was so scared. I was so scared for my life because, I kept on looking at videos that things can go really wrong in those clinics. And I was like, I'm going to be so far away from my kids. Nobody knows where I'm going to be at.
Yeah.
What if something happens to me?
Right.
I wasn't thinking about the baby.
Yeah. It's like you wanted to protect yourself. You had said earlier that you didn't really want to go through with this, right? It's just the situation you were in. Yeah.
But at that day, I was more scared for my life. I try not to think about the baby at that time, because I was like, if I start thinking about it, I'm gonna be, I'm gonna want to keep it, and that's not what I want.
Yeah.
So I was so scared for my life. I was like, what if I go over there and I get an infection and I don't make it back, or the plane crashes or something, all these thoughts, came to my head. And then, she called me again. The lady called me again and she was like, are you ready? I was like, yes, but I'm scared. She's like, don't be scared. Yeah. She said, once you get to Washington in the clinic, we're going to have I don't know what you call them. I forgot the word.
Like an escort?
Like a nurse, but she stays with you through the whole process.
Oh, like a abortion doula.
Doula, yes.
Yeah, wow.
That was my first time hearing the word. I remember I Googled it because I was like, what is that?
Yeah.
And it's, it's somebody that stays with you throughout the whole process. They were even willing to pay for her to go to the hotel with me.
Wow.
Because they knew I was going to fly by myself. And I guess the procedure was kind of, big. So they were like, in case you have a bleeding at night or something, she's going to be there with you.
Right.
So it was my first time hearing about a doula. So I was like, oh my God, thank you, God. Thank you for hearing my prayers. Thank you for understanding that I didn't, I'm not ready for this.
Yeah.
That, I was... It's not okay for me to have another child. So in a way, I felt like God was answering my my prayers,
Isn't that interesting to look back and like now, of course, see the journey a bit differently, right? So you talked to her, and then was it that afternoon that I called?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And what do you remember about, obviously I remember our phone call vividly, right? But what do you remember from the phone call? I remember that the kids went down for a nap, and so they had told me to call between, I think, this time and this time.
Yes.
So I went ahead and said my prayers, and then I called you, right? So do you remember what that was like?
I do. I remember,
Yeah.
you told me, you were like, I'm not going to judge you, Maria. And you asked me, why are you so desperate? And I told you, because financially I can't. There's no other word or any other excuse for it. Financially, I cannot.
You're in survival mode.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
remember I told you again, I work a 60-hour shift. I'm here all day at the daycare. I'm here from 6:30 to 6:30. I don't take a lunch break. I eat in the classroom just so I can get that hour paid for.
Yeah.
So,
Making ends meet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
and I remember you said, well, Maria, the Lord is always here. And he told me to call you. And I remember I told you, I said, Lord, please don't leave me. If you're willing to help me out, please don't forget about me throughout the way. I remember I told you, I said, and you were like, no, I promise you, I won't.
Yeah.
And I told you, but I already paid money. I'm not going to get that money back. And you were like, just try, call them, cancel the appointment, and see what they tell you. So I did, I called them, and the lady was like, but why do you want to cancel it? And I told her, because I'm not ready. I said, but I spent most of the money that you gave me. So, then at that point, I kind of felt like I was now forced to do it because I had spent some of the money. How was I going to pay that money back?
And a lot of women feel that
Yeah.
way, that many times they want to change their minds.
Now in a way, I
but
see it like it's a business. It's a business.
yeah. I think that's a good insight, that they're giving you so much and you almost feel obligated then to go through with the procedure, right?
And because you use that money to pay for bills before you go, and then you feel like if you cancel it, now where am I going to get the money from to pay them back? And I was so scared for it. I was like, where am I going to get $700? Because I had already spent $700.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember in our first conversation, we had promised to replace whatever money personally for you that you needed, right?
I told you, Lauren, but I already paid $250. And you were like, Maria, don't worry about that.
Yeah.
Do not worry about that. So I called them, the lady tries to, be like, no, we're going to help you out. No, nothing's going to go wrong, because I gave her the excuse of, I'm scared, that something's going to happen to me. She was like, we're not going to leave you alone. We're going to be with you throughout the whole process. After the process, if you need therapy, we will offer you therapy.
So she's starting to push now. She's starting to push for you to keep the appointment.
She was like, but she was like, let me tell you something. She's like, if you don't want to do it right now, that Monday that I had the appointment, because I was supposed to fly a Sunday, she was like, Washington does full term, which at that time I didn't know what full term was. And I remember I asked you, I said, well, how does the full term abortion work? And you told me, well, they, basically it's a whole baby that they pull out.
Right. They deliver the baby stillborn.
Yeah.
They, for people who are listening that may not understand a late term procedure like that, it's 1 to 2 days of laminaria that dilates the cervix. They beforehand go in and inject digoxin, right?
I see that. That's another thing that when you told me about it, because we don't have that type of education on how abortions work. So to me, it was like, okay, full term. I guess they put a vacuum in there and they they just
pull it out. And you're done.
Yeah, you're done. No.
Yeah.
From what now my understanding is that it's a 2-day procedure,
or sometimes even 3.
Even 3 days. Yeah, because she told me that I had to be off of work for that whole week. And the best part of it, they were willing to pay for that whole week of me missing work.
So they were going to replace that money as well.
That whole week. Wow. I mean, she was like, you're gonna go in, we're gonna do a check on you, and then we're gonna inject you something to stop the heartbeat from the baby.
That's the digoxin.
I was like,
yeah.
Oh my God. So it is a baby inside. At first they didn't want to tell me it was a baby.
But then at that
They don't say
stage,
the word baby. They don't use the word
yeah,
baby. They use another word.
like specimen
Yeah,
or
fetus,
fetus. They will
fetus.
say
Yeah,
fetus.
yeah. They
Yeah.
say fetus. I guess they don't want to,
Humanize it
yeah,
too much.
yeah.
You might change your mind,
Yes.
and they don't
So
want
yeah,
that at this
and
point.
never in the conversations that we had, she never used the word baby. Yeah,
Interesting.
the word baby was never used in there.
I'm even surprised that she mentioned that they would stop the heartbeat. Although at that point, I do hear that the later term facilities will kind of stay at a 30,000 foot view, right? But so they'll touch on a couple things that are going to happen, but they don't get very
Yeah.
descriptive.
No, yeah, because
Yeah.
she didn't mention how the procedure was going to work. You were the one that explained it to me.
Yeah.
She made it seem like, okay, we're gonna inject you. You go, you come back, you dilate, and then
And you bleed for a couple
yeah,
days.
she said it's like a heavy period. Those were the words. She never said we're gonna pull a leg or a head. And no, none of that is mentioned. It's always a fetus, and it's a heavy period. It's really bad cramping, but that's about it. But the words baby are never mentioned. None of like heartbeat, none of that stuff is mentioned. They use other words for it.
Yeah. What was it that you feel like helped you to really change your mind that day? Because I remember that we talked, you burst into tears. You were so gracious in sharing your story with me. And at that point, the Lord allowed me to come alongside you as kind of the new counselor, right? Or I'm not a counselor. I'm a counselor at law. I'm an attorney, right? That does this work. But, the Lord almost like allowed someone else in a new community to come in and to take over. You had been praying. You had been asking God to show you, right?
I don't go to church very often, but I do believe in God.
Yeah.
Especially because of my mom. She's
Such
like
a
I say,
witness.
yes.
Yeah.
So I remember, that and still when I talk to you, I was like, I think she's lying to me. And let me tell you a funny thing about all this. When I told my mom about you, she's like, are you sure it's not the black market that they want to keep the baby?
Like, how could somebody just come in and actually just want to help you and not get anything out of it?
I remember
right?
you told me you were a lawyer, and I told my mom, I said, no, Mom. I said, she's a really nice person. She's a lawyer. She said, you got to be careful. She said, there's a lot of people out there that, want you to have the babies and then sell them on the black market.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah.
She put that on my head. I was like, that could be right, because out of nowhere, people don't come into you. And I think every now and then when I text with you, I always tell you, it's because I don't know what I did to, for you to help me so much. And I always tell you, I know, Lauren, you always tell me it was God, but no, I see you as my angel. So, at that time, I was like, I think my mom is right. They do want me to have the baby, and maybe,
maybe they actually do care and they want to help, right? Which is mind-blowing. So it's like you had said to me too that this pro-abortion funding group and Bridget Alliance sounds like they were working with someone else as well, right? I mean, it's all started with Planned Parenthood. They lined all of this up for you. You got it like that. And you had said to me, Lauren, the pro-life community, where are they to help someone like that?
That's right. That's what I told you. I said, how can did you say that there's people that want to help, but where's the help at?
Yeah.
Where's the help when we need it?
Yeah.
Their Planned Parenthood, all these other, clinics are willing to help you. They send you the money in a blink of an eye because they know you're in desperate for the money.
Yeah. You had told me, and I mean, we had been on the phone then many times after we initially made contact. They didn't leave you alone. So this is what's so interesting to me is they were your friend up until this point. And then when you made your choice to cancel the abortion and decide that you were going to trust me and you're going to trust our community to be there for you, they did not stop calling or texting you. Was it for 2 weeks?
I remember I called you and I told you, but they're still calling me. And you were like, I'm sorry. She was like, I was like, what do you think I should do? And, I was like, should I block my number? But yeah, they called me. They, even a week after all this, that's when they said, Washington is willing to do up to 9 months.
Golly.
So if you ever feel like, you want to come back, we're going to keep your paperwork, for up to a whole month, because they do 9-month abortions.
So you can always reschedule. And I
Yeah.
remember them even saying, we'll hold your appointment for a
Yes.
few days, right?
Yes. And, I
Yeah.
called them to give my money back because, I was like, those are $250.
Yeah.
And the lady was like, oh, no, I'm sorry, but we can't give it back to you. At that time, they were very rude, And I remember I called you and I told you, they don't want to give me the money back. And you were like, Maria, don't worry about it.
We'll take care of
We'll
it.
take care of it.
So it's like they would not give you your $250 deposit back. I said, don't worry about it, right? But then a switch seemed to flip, and all of a sudden they're bombarding you with calls and
Yes.
texts, and many times late into the evening, right?
At work, I remember my manager, she saw me on the camera, and she was like, are you on the phone? And I was like, no, I'm not. She was like, I'm looking at you on the camera. You are on the phone. But it was them, they call me nonstop. Messages, emails, which I still have. The text message, I save everything. So I have all of that.
Gosh.
I have all our messages. Even when she mentions, if you want to think about it, we're always going to be here to help you. We don't judge you. And that was always their word.
So it's almost like they're putting relentless pressure on you, but then saying still, we won't judge you. We're here for you.
Yes.
Hey, call us back.
Yes.
Hey, we can do this abortion right up until pretty much he's born, right? I mean, just one thing after another, trying to get you to keep your appointment, to follow through with it.
And at that time, I didn't know why. I thought it was like they're helping us out. I didn't know that there was money involved for the clinics.
Right.
All this time, I thought, well, they're so nice. There's nice people out there that care about you. And maybe they, they don't want you to have any more kids because they know that you're already going through hardship.
Yeah.
But I didn't know that, all these doctors, nurses involved in it. There's a lot of money involved
There's
in
a
it.
lot. Yeah,
So
abortion is a
whatever
big
they
business.
give us is, like they said, cheap change.
Right.
Compared to what they get.
That abortionist in DC makes thousands of dollars off of every abortion that he does, right? And it's shrouded in, hey, we care. And I'm not even saying that there aren't people in the industry who care because they have an abortion in their past and they've struggled. We know that that's the case from hearing from former workers. But again, they're there to take your baby from you and then play on your fears. Like I remembered that one of them did get you on the phone, right?
Yes.
Do you remember that conversation, what she said to you? Because I remembered you saying after to me that she was just playing on your every fear, like you're going to struggle if you don't go through with this,
it was
right?
the one of the people from Washington, D.C., she was like, it's so hard, you're sick, because I told her, that I was a diabetic, and because I was scared, that I was going to overbleed or something. She's like, you need to really think about it,
Yeah.
We're always going to be here for you,
Yeah. Yeah.
She's like, you don't have to worry about nothing. We will have somebody with you throughout the whole process. We know life is not easy, and that's why we don't judge.
Yeah. And I remembered that I talked to you right after that because you said somebody had gotten a hold of you. Another phone number had come through,
from
right?
a different number.
From
yes.
another number, and you were crying. And I remembered you saying, they kept saying to me that if I don't get this done, I'm going to struggle for the rest of my life. They were doing what they could to get you to go through with it.
Because like I said, the first thing when you call them and they ask you, why do you want to have it? Because, I can't afford to have another child. So they play all that back into your head,
Yeah, yeah. When you look at where you were at 26 weeks to then having Jesus, right? And what God did through all of that. How did you see how faithful God is? How did you see him show up for you and change the rest of your story and really answer your prayers?
I'm blessed right now. When we were praying right now before starting, I remember the only thing I said is, thank you, God. Thank you for all the blessings that you have given me. Thank you for this person, for you. Remember, still not like 2 weeks ago or a week ago, you were like, how are you doing, Maria? And I told you, well, I told you my job doesn't offer maternity leave or anything like that. So I'm struggling. And you were like, Maria, the Lord has you. And I remember, you you send me money. And I was like, oh my God, Lauren, thank you so much. How did you know I needed it?
Yeah.
It, all this, it's about, it's going to sound really bad, but it's about the money for us.
Survival.
Yes.
Yeah. And what I see in your story is that you had this group, this woman that came to you, and it looked like everything you needed and wanted, right? And there was so much money involved. What's so beautiful is then the Lord allowed someone else to come into your life. I was so privileged to be the person that you talked to, connected you to our community that also raised funds to make sure you had everything that you needed, the baby shower that we
Everything.
threw. You know,
Yeah.
you got to meet new friends through that. You got to meet Diane, who we're going to bring into the conversation a little bit later here, right? And the Lord surrounded you, it seemed to me, with a village, right?
Yeah. And which to this day, I always ask myself, why? Why? Why me? And I think I told Diana, I said, why do I care about people like me? Because I always see myself as, we're people don't care about people like me. We're so left alone. We're so left behind. We're only good to work, 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 work. So I still, sometimes, and I remember Diane, she was like, because you're one of us,
Yeah. It's like you had said to me at one point, thank you for seeing me,
Yeah.
right? And I think I said to you, we're all really the same. Some of us might live in a bigger house here and there, right?
Yes.
But we're all just trying to figure it out. We're all trying to get up the next day and be better than we were before and follow the Lord, right? Who really wants to give us his peace and his abundant life. I just marvel at your story so much for so many reasons, but it's just so interesting to me how, again, the enemy can work. He can come in and say, oh, this is really the path that you should take, right? And it looks so good on the surface. It initially feels like your prayers are being answered, but then in the back of your mind, there's that still small voice that started with your mom, that even increased as you looked at the children that you were serving in the daycare, right? I think you said that you had another relative that said something to you about the life of your baby in the womb. And I remember too, after we finally got connected, it was almost like the completion, I think, of what God was already doing, even back to when you met the sidewalk advocate back in Kansas, who was so memorable, right? But then a new story took over and you were willing to open your heart to that and to say yes. Because what I've heard you say, and even here in this interview, is deep down inside, you knew, right? Like you knew that this wasn't right.
Yeah.
You just didn't know what to do.
I've never been okay with abortions. When I hear it, and even some friends, I'm like, why will you do it? Yeah. Not until you're put in that position, and you're like, that's why. This is what drives you to, do something like that.
And I know that like there's still more of your life left, more of the journey. But at this point, when you hold your son and you see him, and that he's here and he's safe and he's healthy, right? And you look back, what comes to mind? What hits you about what God has done?
Of course, forgiveness. The first thing that when I see him, I ask for forgiveness and I tell God, thank you. Thank you for, I guess he allowed me to go through all this to see that there's people out there that care about you, but that there's so much evil too,
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
And I've always, I named him Jesus because, of Jesus. Because I always see him as a gift from God, Yeah. And now I don't see even at night when he's crying hysterically, I look at him, I'm like, oh, thank God he's crying,
He's safe.
Yeah.
He's safe. And you guys are okay. And I know that, you still have cares, you still have things that you're having to take to the Lord and say, I'm trusting you, right? I'm trusting you to provide for us. But look at what he's already done, right? That there really are people who care. And I just want to thank you personally too, because it's not easy to sit in front of hundreds, possibly thousands of people and say, this is my story, right? But I know you did it because you wanted to help other women.
Because like I told you, there's so many women out there that are scared, to ask for help, or that don't know that there's people out there that are willing to help you.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's people that are willing to help you. There's people that are not going to judge you. And I told you, Lauren, if you ever need me to go somewhere with you, I will go.
Yeah.
If I can help, not money wise, because I don't have that, but just telling people my story, helping other women, stopping people from having an abortion, even going out and standing in one of those clinics outside. That to me, that's, kind of giving back, so much that I've been blessed with.
Yeah.
And even like I told you, Lauren, now, you helped me a lot, financially, because that was my biggest fear when I found out I was pregnant. But the help that you taught me to believe more in God, and that there's people that people don't have to know you to care about you. Because you always tell me, Maria, I have this group of people that are, they're going to pray for you. I'm like, people don't have to know you to know your struggles, to know that, your needs.
They care just because.
Yes.
Just because.
Yes.
Not because they're getting anything out of it, but because. And that's really what we're called to do. Yeah. That's so good. Well, I want to thank you because you've inspired us at Sidewalk Advocates for Life to form Maria's Fund. We're going to be talking about that actually in the next episode, how people can be a part of that and helping moms that have been in your situation before. Because if the abortion industry is at the ready like that to hand women hundreds and thousands of dollars, right? How much more do we as a people of God need to be there for folks who are struggling and need a hand, right? Not a handout, but a hand up to the life that God really wants to give them. So thank you for courageously being willing to sit down with me and to share your story.
Oh, you're welcome. And,
so
like
beautiful.
I said, I'm blessed. I'm very blessed.
Yes.
Very blessed to call you my friend.
Absolutely. Friends for life. So
Yes.
family for life. Yeah. All right. And thank all of you again for joining me for another episode of the Lauren Muzyka Show. We'll be back here next Friday at 9 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Central on the Sidewalk Advocates for Life Facebook page, YouTube channel, or wherever you get podcasts for the second half of my conversation with Maria. Thanks so much, everyone.